Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Carol, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing with you guys a little bit of what I know about accommodation in Poland. This is a question that I get a lot of times. Like, people are always asking me, where can I get a house? I'm looking for a house and stuff like that. So I was like, you know what, let's just make a video for the people. But before we get into that, please help me fix this problem. 81% of the people that watch my videos are not subscribed. That is a huge number. Please do subscribe. If it is your first time and you find value in what I'm sharing, or if you find this video somewhat entertaining or useful, please do consider subscribing, you guys. This is a very bad ratio. So to the reason why we are all here, accommodation in Poland. Now I want to start by saying, like anywhere else, if you're not going to opt for the student dormitories that are readily available, finding accommodation is going to be very difficult, you guys. It is a full-time job on its own. Like, I cannot emphasize this enough. So obviously, if you're coming as a student, the number one option available to you is your student dormitories. This is what I used when I first came to Poland, and yeah, I do find that if it's your first time, you don't know anybody here, it would be somewhat more convenient for you because the school has everything prepared. All you have to do is sign your contract and pay your money. So yeah, that's the number one option that you have. And the way that I've set up this video is I'm going to be sharing with you guys some advantages and disadvantages from my perspective of the different types of accommodation that you have. When I came to Poland, I lived in a school dormitory, like I mentioned before. At my dormitory where I actually stayed, the setup was they had what they called double rooms. In these double rooms, it meant that in one room there would be two people sharing that same space. So you have your bed at the other hand and you have your roommate's bed at the other end. So that's where I stayed. In the same apartment, there'll be another room where there are two people sharing the same space. So you find in one apartment there'll be 4 people. So that's what they kind of called a double room. And then we all would share our kitchen and our bathroom, like that. And then the other setup was there would be 2 people in an apartment, each with their own bedroom, but sharing a kitchen and a bathroom. That's what they kind of called a single room in a shared apartment. So yeah, that is the kind of setup that you can expect from school accommodation. Also do have some options where you can just have your own studio apartment. You really don't have to share any space with anyone except the actual apartment building. But yeah, that is what the school accommodation is set up like. And the advantages that I found from my school accommodation was, number one, like I mentioned before, it was readily available. The school is always going to make sure that whatever students they bring in, they can have a space to stay. Nice that I came in November, school had started like back in October, but I could still find a place to stay. So it is readily available, and like I said before, it's your school, so you don't have to worry about are they legitimate and all that stuff. Everything is pretty straightforward. In my own experience, when I was staying in the student dormitory, if ever I raised up a complaint about, hey, our shower is blocked or this broke, it would pretty much get fixed instantly. Like within 24 hours we would have our stuff sorted out. So that was another advantage that I found. Another advantage that I found staying in school accommodation was, you know, when you stay in a place you pay a deposit, and then when you move out, if you haven't broken anything, they're supposed to give you money back. And I got my entire deposit back. I was actually surprised because I know that from, you know, some experiences and other people's stories, they might not really want to give you back the full deposit. Even if you haven't broken anything, they'll try and just find little things. The accommodation that I stayed in, the dormitory that I stayed in, it was not like that. I hadn't broken anything. I got all my money back. So that was another advantage that I found when it comes to, you know, school dormitories, because I guess their reputation is kind of on the line, so they have to kind of do things by the book. The last advantage that I found from this place that I stayed was it was very close to the school. It was not within the school campus, but it was literally 10 minutes walking to school. So that was quite an advantage for me. You know that if you wake up the time that your class is supposed to start, you can still make it to class. The disadvantage that I personally found with school accommodation is sometimes it does tend to be a little bit overpriced. Like I told you that I was sharing my actual room with somebody else and I was paying 700, and the space that we were sharing was not even that big. So you find that it is kind of overpriced, because right now I pay the same 700. I have my own personal room, and though we do pay our bills separately, if we are being responsible and economic, that is, you find that our bills would never exceed like 200. So I feel like school accommodation in some ways can be a bit overpriced. The other issue that I had with staying in school accommodation was the pressure on facilities. We didn't have things like a washing machine in the apartment. They were in common areas, and oh my god, it was so difficult to find a washing machine that would be vacant. So you realize you have this whole building and maybe it's like what, 10-15 washing machines for I don't know how many students. The next type of accommodation is when you have your own apartment. It's not tied to the school. Your landlord has no affiliates with the school or anything like that. And these apartments come in various forms. You can live alone in a studio apartment, or you can live in a shared apartment where you will have your own room, share facilities like your kitchen area and your living area, or a living room if there's any. Sometimes you can find that in the way that people share the actual room in dormitories, you can find apartments like that where you can share your actual room with other people, but obviously it's going to be significantly less than school accommodation or school dormitories. To be comfortable in a comfortable area, I would say starting from 600 going up, that would be a comfortable living space. And then for your studio apartments, I would say around 1,200 zlotys. That would be like the best deal that you can get, excluding bills. And that's the thing about private apartments. Whenever you see that whatever money you're going to pay excludes bills, know that you're going to be in for it. Oh my gosh, the bills in this country are so expensive, especially if you're reckless in the way that you use your facilities. But if you do, watch how you use your water, watch how you use your electricity, it's reasonable. But if you're not, you are going to be paying for your bills through the nose. Now you're wondering, where can I find these private accommodations? There are different platforms that you can find houses to rent in Poland. The ones that I'm most familiar with are allx.com. Everything is going to be linked in the description box. And then there's Autodom. I'm also going to link it in the description box. The other popular one is Facebook Market. There are groups where people put up houses for rent. So for example, you want to come to Lublin, what you would type in your Facebook search is apartments to rent in Lublin, or Lublin apartments to rent, or something like that. You will have a lot of apartments come up. Those are the main platforms that I am familiar with, that I've used in the past. So the number one advantage of accommodation outside of school, I'm just gonna call it private accommodation, it's the flexibility in pricing options. Like, if your money was tight, you can really find some ridiculously cheap apartments. It might not be comfortable, it might not be ideal, but you still have a place to stay. Maybe if it's a hostel where maybe 3 or 4 people share a room, which is kind of common, you can find those places. It's going to be, very cheap. So I think that is the number one advantage of outside accommodation. Other advantage is obviously the independence that you have when you have your own apartment. Of course, you're not gonna have to do whatever you want at somebody's house. You have to kind of follow the rules that they have, but most of the times these landlords just want you to take good care of their property, and that's it. Whereas with school accommodation, there's things like you might not be allowed to have people sleep over, or if people sleep over, it's a cap to how long they can be there. You know, there's a lot of rules that are tied with school accommodation. You get what I'm saying? If it's just 3 of you in an apartment like us, then you know that there is not going to be any pressure with your shared facilities. Like, if you want to wash, there's no way that I'm gonna have to wait 2 days to wash. It's just me and 2 other people, so there's no pressure on those facilities. Although I stay outside of school, I would say sometimes private accommodation, especially as a foreigner, might have more disadvantages. Although it is more affordable, it's flexible and stuff like that. So the number one that I find is, fortunately, you guys, in Poland, some landlords are not open to renting out their homes to foreigners. I'm sorry to break it to you, but it is the way that it is. Like I said before, looking for accommodation generally is difficult, so you add in that extra bump in the road, it even becomes more difficult. I remember when I was trying to move from the school accommodation to private accommodation, I would send, let's say, 10 messages on Facebook. Like, I see posts in houses that I like. I would say for every 10 that I sent out, I would get at least 2 or 3 that would say, oh no, we are only looking for Polish people and stuff like that. So yeah, it is what it is. But obviously I'm here, I have a beautiful home, and I'm not homeless, so it's not something to really be stressed about and be like, oh my god. But you know, just prepare yourself for that. Second disadvantage is, like I always tell you guys in my videos, the official language in Poland is Polish. You will not find a lot of people that can understand English. That means your landlords are not an exception. You might be lucky and find someone who can speak English, but sometimes you might not be so lucky, which makes communication kind of difficult, especially when you have problems and you're trying to communicate to them like, hey, this and this happened, and they don't understand you. In as much as we have Google Translate, sometimes it just does not put the point across. That communication barrier, you will feel it when your landlord does not speak English, or you don't rather speak Polish. You might have trouble kind of understanding each other sometimes. But yeah, most of the times Google Translate does help, but sometimes it just cannot help enough to put across whatever you're trying to communicate to your landlord. Another kind of disadvantage maybe to staying outside of school or looking for accommodation outside of school is trying to find that place that is actually close to your school, like within a walking distance. That is very difficult. Sometimes you find an accommodation that you like, it's nice, it suits your personal taste, your aesthetics, it's in your budget, and then you look up the distances on Google Maps and it's telling you like it's an hour or an hour 30 minutes from your school, and you're like, what? But yeah, it does happen, because the accommodations that are close to school, as soon as it goes up on the market, people are gonna go for it and take it, because everyone wants to stay close to school. So those are not up for very long. But yeah, it's just, it is what it is. Other disadvantage that might come with you know, living outside of school, in as much as I share with you guys things from my perspective, I also do have acquaintances and friends who, you know, tell me stuff. So I do know that some landlords are very inefficient when it comes to trying to fix things. Like, it's not even a joke. That is one of the reasons why I've decided to stay where I stay now, even though I would have liked a bigger place, because I'm like, what if I move out, find the bigger place, but then my landlord is just, you know, not nice, and I'm there struggling and stuff like that. I've actually, because I've seen some of my friends struggle with trying to get their landlords to just do the barest of minimum maintenance. It's hard, you know. It's even surprising, especially considering I pay you rent, I'm not owing you any money, and then when I ask you to fix this thing, you drag your feet. It doesn't make sense. I was lucky, we were lucky, our landlord is very efficient. Like, if we have a problem with our shower, within the same day it's fixed. If we have a problem with anything, he really does try to fix things as soon as possible. So yeah, we were lucky in that regard, but some people not so much. And then the biggest yes, I will call this the biggest disadvantage of living outside of school. It is the bills. Oh my god, if you find that apartment that says you're going to pay your bills separately, oh my god, you are not going to be ready for it. Like I mentioned earlier, obviously you can eventually get to a point where you tell yourself, like, I have to manage the way that I use facilities. But yeah, any little recklessness and those bills are going to bring you down. I always tell people of our first water bill that we got in Poland that was well over 1,000 zlotys, and for a moment we thought there's no way our landlord is trying to cheat us, he's trying to steal money from us. And we were actually, for like weeks, we were calculating how much water we were using and stuff, and realized, oh child, we actually were wasting water and stuff like that. So we kind of put systems in place to ensure that, you know, we wouldn't use as much water. And now our bill is literally half of what we first paid in our first payment. So yeah, when you do come to Poland and you're not careful with how you use facilities, you're going to find yourself working to pay bills because they can go ridiculously high. Guys, that is it from me. I do hope that this video kind of gave you some kind of insight as to what kind of accommodation you can expect, the living conditions in Poland. Everything is going to be linked in the description box, and I will catch up with you guys next week.